Good day, students, and you're welcome to the contact session for Namibian and Regional Economics, Nreos1, the regional economics for the certificate first year. My name is Ruth Ekunjabi, and I'll be your tutor, and I'll be taking you through the course outline for this course as well as a look into the tutorial letter, a tutorial guide, which is going to help you in writing your assignments for 2018. A brief overview of the course outline before we come to the tutorial letter. The course outline once again starts with an introduction. But in this context, we need to introduce what economics is and what regional economics is. We're going to look into the sectors of the Namibian economy. We'll look at the role of the government in the economy. We'll look into national planning, the role of the NPC, which is the National Planning Commission in the Namibian context. We look at development goals. We're going to look into the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations as well as the Vision 2030. Then we look into the economies of the region, and the region is the region of SADC, the South African Development Community. Then we look into regional integration, international trade agreements, and export processing zones. Let's start with the definition and the main concepts of the course. Explain the subject matter of economics. At this point, you need to be able to define and explain what economics is all about. And you need to get yourself, at this point, a textbook that is going to help you with understanding these concepts. Economics is basically the study of human behavior in relationship to the ends and scarce means. We have limited resources and unlimited wants and needs. And this is therefore the study of how we as human beings react to these situations. Then we're going to distinguish between microeconomics and macroeconomics. Microeconomics looks into the little things of the economy, and macroeconomics looks into the bigger aspects of the economy, looking at the bigger picture. Microeconomics, by the way of definition, studies the economy at an individual level, a group level, or a company or firm level, focusing on the issues which affects the firm or the individual. Macroeconomics, on the other hand, studies the whole economy, focusing on national outputs, governmental decisions, issues such as unemployment, issues as poverty, and inflation. That is what economics is all about. The course title, once again, is Namibian and Regional Economics. Before we talk about the economics of Namibia and the economics of the region, which is SADC, we need to understand the basic concepts of what economics is all about. That is what economics is, the two main aspects, micro and macro. Another point here, the third point, is the concept of scarcity, needs, wants, and opportunity costs. What is scarcity? Scarcity resources are scarce. What is a need, and how is it different from a want? Needs are things that are necessary, such as food, the need for clothing, food, shelter, and healthcare. Wants, on the other hand, are things that are not really necessary, such as fashion or designer clothes and all that. Then opportunity cost. You also need to know and be able to define and explain what opportunity cost is, which is the alternative for GAN. Since resources are very limited, if I decide to choose A, it means I leave B. And if I decide to choose B, it means I leave A. And that choice means that I have to make a decision between the two. Therefore, the cost of A that I have is the alternative of not taking B, and that is what opportunity cost is all about. And the fourth point, still in concepts and definitions, identify the main factors of production and how important is that to the well-being of a country. What are the factors of production? We know it's land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurship. And how important is that to the well-being of a country? How important is land to the economy of a country? Land is very important for production. How important is labor? That is the human resources. How important is that to the well-being of a country? How important is capital, money? How important is that to the well-being of a country? And entrepreneurship? Entrepreneurship is something we all talk about. How important is the entrepreneur to the well-being of a country? This is what this course has to do with. I mean, you need to be able to explain the link between these points. I talked about scarcity and opportunity cost. Let me move on to economic problems. Before we look into the economy of Namibia and SADC, what are the basic problems which cuts across every economy? Not just the Namibian economy, but every economy. In economics, we have three main problems which every economy faces. The first one is what to produce. What would a country produce, specialize in producing, to give a very good output? In other words, to give a very good GDP. How do we produce it in terms of technological advancement, and what do we need the know-how to transform the inputs, the raw inputs, to finished goods? How do we do that? The third problem is when do we produce it? When do we do that? And the last one is for whom do we produce? I mean, for who is the target? What is the target market? Where do we export those goods to? And these are the basic economic problems every economy faces. You should be able to explain what each of them means. Then we talk about economic systems. Economic system is talking about the way the government manages or influences the economy of a country. It could be command, such as in socialism or communism. It could be a free market economy where the forces of demand and supply are allowed to operate freely. It could be traditional, such as we have in the villages and the settlements, especially in Africa. Or it could be a mixed economic system, such as we have in Namibia, in this country. It's a mixture of a free market economy and a command economy, where the government comes in to ensure that things are working. Economic sectors, three main economic sectors in every economy: the primary sector, the secondary sector, and the tertiary sector. At this point, at this level, you should be able to define what an economic sector is and what are the components of the sector. For instance, the primary sector. This is the sector of an economy that focuses on the raw material. The fishing sector, the agricultural sector, the mining sector fall under the primary sector. Secondary sector is transforming the raw material to finished goods. The manufacturing sector, producing clothes from wool, wood from furniture, furniture from wood, and that. The tertiary sector is the services sector. It talks about services, basically the service aspect of the economy. And these are the three sectors of every economy. And let's also define regional economics before we move on. This is the study of the economic behavior of businesses, consumers, and government, and how these behaviors affect the economic development of a region. The region we're looking at is the SADC region. Now let's go into the Namibian economy. What are the sectors of this economy? There's so many sectors, but the four main sectors which we refer to as the pillars of the economy. In other words, these four sectors generate the bulk of the GDP. The tourism sector, the mining sector, the fishing sector, and agriculture. What is important at this point? Firstly, we need to be able to describe the demographics of the country as much as you can. There's a book by Robin Sherburne, A Guide to the Namibian Economy. There's one published early this year. And it talks about it gives us facts and figures about the economy, especially as relates to each of the sectors. What is the importance of the tourism sector? What is its contribution to the GDP? How many people does it employ? These are the things that we need to get familiar with when discussing about the Namibian economy. The fishing sector. How important is the fishing sector? What is the contribution to the GDP? What is the contribution to employment and all that? And because we are looking at the economy from an economic point of view, not political or demographic, but the contribution of each of these sectors to the GDP of a country. There are other sectors like the banking, the communication sector. You should also read up those sectors, how important they are. Let's move on to the role of the government in the macroeconomy. The government is divided into three branches: the executive, the legislative, and the judiciary. What is important at this point is you need to familiarize yourself with the composition and the function of each arm of the government. Secondly, you need to know the role and importance of the government in the functioning of the economy. In other words, the government the government is there. What is their role in making sure that the economy develops? And we can look at things like law and order, tax compliance, and all that. That is how the government can make sure that the economy is working. Then excuse me, the course outline takes us also to national development planning. National development is the ability of a country to improve social welfare of the people. What is social welfare? Amenities. Social amenities like quality education, potable water, transportation, infrastructure, medical care. That is what developmental planning is all about. What is the importance of development planning? The first point is to enhance the national economic development of the country. National development planning. National development planning in Namibia. And we're going to discuss the role of the National Planning Commission, which is the NPC. In Namibia, development planning is the role of the National Planning Commission. And since independence, the National Planning Commission has rolled out 5 plans, which we call the NDPs, as well as the Harambee Prosperity Plan. The first plan, which started in 1995 to 2000, each plan spans for a period of 5 years. The first National Development Plan, which is NDP1, it has 4 important points which you need to know, because there's a question in the tutorial letter that talks about the NDPs. What are the components of NDP1? The NDP1 talks about stimulating and sustaining economic growth, reducing inequalities, reducing poverty, and creating employment. NDP2 from 2001 to 2006 has more points, but you can read them and note as much as you can. We have the 4 points from the NDP1, which is poverty, unemployment, inequality, but other things were added, such as to combat the further spread of HIV/AIDS, to promote gender equality and equity, and also to stimulate and sustain economic growth. Also to look at the environment, enhance environmental and ecological sustainability. That is the national plan in the developmental planning of Namibia. The third plan, which started in 2007 to 2012, has more structured points. It talks about increasing employment opportunities through rapid promotion of economic growth. It talks about an increase in education and human resource development. This plan also talks about the natural resources to make sure it's sustainable, and communication, enhance access to reliable and affordable communication services. This is NDP 3 in a nutshell. And NDP3 has been put in the form of a circle. If you read through the documents from the National Planning Commission, NDP3 is presented this way, which is quite easy to look at. It's made up of 8 sectors: a knowledge-based economy, quality of life, equity and social welfare, peace, security, stability. So this is NDP3 in a nutshell, which is quite easy to understand. So if the question should be asked, what is NDP3 all about? This is what you're going to talk about in terms of the development planning. NDP4, which ran from 2012 to 2017, the period we're in right now, is presented in the form of a pyramid. Now, this presentation is once again from the National Planning Commission. They presented it this way. And you can see that up there is a top-bottom approach, not from the bottom to the top, but from the top to the bottom. You can see the first sector up there talks about employment, income inequality, and growth. And those are the overall goals. The priorities are to make sure that there is progress reporting, execution, monitoring, and evaluation. Then there are basic enablers and economic priorities. The basic enablers are what is going to enable this plan to be achieved: public infrastructure, reducing extreme poverty, health, education and skills, institutional development. These are the enablers to enable the economy to grow the way they want it to grow. On the other hand, economic priorities. What are the priorities that the government wants to look at this point? There's a priority in logistics. We can see the port of Bavish Bay and what is going on there right now. There's a priority in tourism. There's a priority in manufacturing as well as agriculture. And this is going to give the desired outcomes, as you can see at the bottom of the pyramid, as well as strategic incentives. Those are the development planning 1 to 4, NDPs 1 to 4. We also need to look into the Sustainable Development Goals. This is by the United Nations. They want peace and prosperity for all by the year 2030. And as such, there's 17 goals which are enumerated in this slide. You can read them. This is just a few of them. They want an end to poverty, protect the planet, ensure peace and prosperity. 17 goals in total, which I'd like you to read up. But let's come back to the Namibian economy. There's also the Vision 2030. And the Vision 2030 also looks at these points on the screen: macroeconomic issues, health, development, the natural resource sector, knowledge, IT, and human resource development, inequality, social welfare, and all that. So this is all what we have for developmental planning. Then we move into the region. We've talked about Namibia, we talked about the structure of the government, we talked about the pillars of the economy, we talked about the planning that is going on towards the Vision 2030. Now let's talk about the region. The region in consideration is the SADC region, the South African Development Community, which is made up of 15 countries. The first concept here is the concept of regional integration, the process whereby states, in other words, countries, enter into an agreement to enhance regional cooperation. In other words, countries come together to facilitate regional cooperation so that each of the economies in these countries could also experience growth and progress. In Africa, we have 8 regional integrations: in the West, in the North, in the South, in the Sahel. But what is interesting, what we are concerned with at this point is the SADC. And what are the benefits or the advantages of this regional cooperation? This is what you need to focus on. As you can see in this slide, it contributes to strengthen trade, it contributes to peace and security, builds environmental programs at the regional level, and basically strengthens the region's interaction with the rest of the world. Now, we look into SADC. What are the benefits of Namibia being a member of SADC? Also related to the points I mentioned earlier. And we come to the concept of economic integration. Regional integration, on one hand, is when countries sign an agreement to facilitate the growth of their economies. But regional integration is when countries sign agreements to remove the barriers to trade barriers between them. What are these barriers, such as tariffs and quotas and border restrictions, and why are these things to be removed? It facilitates political cooperation, it facilitates trade, as well as employment. That is SADC. So in SADC, we just need to know what SADC is all about, the aims and objectives of SADC, the advantages of being a member of SADC, and what is the meaning of economic integration. Now we come to SACU, because we have a Southern African Custom Union as well. What is a custom union? Group of countries that agree to promote free trade with a common external tariff. Among themselves, they can trade freely, but within countries not in the union, they charge an external common tariff. The concepts here which are interesting, you need to note, are what is the meaning of a free trade area and what is the meaning of a common market. There's a difference between the two. SACU has 5 member states. What are the aims and objectives of SACU? This is what you also need to study as you read your text. International trade is another point on the course outline. International trade, the trade and exchange of goods and services across international borders or territories among the nations of the world. What is important and the benefit of this international trade to an economy? That is what is important here. What is the benefit and the importance of international trade to the Namibian economy? Some points here: it improves the GDP by the way of exports, creates employment, and a lot of other things. An EPZ, an export processing zone, which was started in 1995, adopted in 1995, basically a small geographically separated area within a country, the purpose of which is to attract export-oriented industries by offering them especially favorable investment and trade conditions as compared with the other parts of the world. In particular, an EPZ provides for the importation of goods to be used in the production of goods for exports. That is what an EPZ is all about. In Namibia, the government has signed that law into place in 1995. There are lots of export processing zones in the country, especially in the fishing sector. And what is important here is to note, what are the benefits of an EPZ? We have some points here: to attract, to promote, to increase the manufacture of export goods and services. Employment is increased, export earnings is created. It boosts foreign investments as well, and as well as encourages the transfer of technology and skills. Then, what are the advantages of an EPZ to the country? What are they? There's a freedom of location, equal treatment of investors, especially these are the incentives to investors coming to invest in the economy, because an EPZ has to do with investment. Investors come into that sector of the economy. What are the incentives to them? Equal treatment of investors, tax-free, freedom of location, and no time-bound incentives. Then international trade concludes with trade barriers and protectionism. Trade barriers is when countries want to restrict quota, they want to reduce importation and taxation and all that. But protectionism, on the other hand, and it has its own, trade barriers has advantages and disadvantages. But protectionism refers to the government actions and policies to restrict or restrain international trade. And this is done with the intent of protecting local businesses and jobs from foreign competition. So when the government decides to protect the local industry from external competition, that is when we talk about protectionism. And this is very important. What is important here to know is that what is protectionism and why is it important to the development of especially the small sectors of the economy. And that concludes the course outline on this course. Then to the tutorial letter, you come across some words there: describe, define, explain, and discuss. Make sure that you include referencing as well in answering your questions, and answer the questions properly and make your points logical, and that would give you maximum points in your assignments. Once again, Ruth is your tutor, and I wish you the best in the course. Thank you.